Morning and welcome to the Grant Street Experience. I'm your host, Grant Ervin. Great to be with everyone here today. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been getting some comments from some of our listeners as a follow-up to our reading, listening, and watching session. And the suggestion was to invite local authors onto the Grant Street Experience to share their experience about writing and living in Pittsburgh and some of the topics that they're covering. So today we have our first local author, Will 3, author of Harley Law, which is a great tale and story. I've had a chance to read it myself. Uses Pittsburgh as one of its characters. So we thought we'd start with Will and dive into a little bit about the story, his life, and using Pittsburgh as the backdrop for local content and books. So Will, welcome to the Grant Street Experience. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing well. I can't believe I'm the inaugural local author. So I'm even more thrilled now. Thank you.
No, nobody can take that away from you. You are the first local author on the Grant Street Experience.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So the honor is all ours. So Will, maybe just to dive in a little bit, if you can, for listeners, just share a little bit about your story and your experience, and how you got into effectively kind of being a local author.
More or less, being a local author, it's pretty much started when I was in high school, I would say, and I just really enjoyed writing, and just something that I always did. And it took me quite a while, but I finally had the first book published 4 years ago. I have had some success as a very local playwright, with a few small plays that I've written that have been produced. So that's nice. But this was the first book that I had published, and I should say that somebody wanted to publish, and then in the follow-up book to that, the sequel just came out. But it was took a long time to get to that point.
So you mentioned local playwright. So this is kind of a cumulative experience before you got your first book published. Can you talk a little bit about some of those plays that you developed and the stage experience versus the writing experience?
It's two different styles of writing, and I really had to learn how to playwright. It's different because the dialogue in a play is going to be much more succinct, and there's going to be a lot less because you have to give actors room to insert their craft, and that's that was always difficult for me because I want to kind of control everything, And that's really difficult when it's easier to do that when you're writing a book versus writing a play. You got to give the actors some room to act. To give them space, both within their craft, but also on stage. Yeah, and that's just difficult because when you're showing somebody a play that you've written, if they don't have that experience, they're reading it and they might not quite get, well, this doesn't look difficult. I could have written this, but you're writing it for the actors that are going to be there. So
your background, you're kind of a Swiss Army knife guy. You have a background in education and law. How has that kind of formed your writing experience?
I've incorporated as a teacher. I'm currently a full-time teacher at the university school in Shadyside. And I incorporate a lot of writing into my lessons, and the students do more writing in my classes, whether it's, world history or psychology, whether they're freshmen or seniors, they write a lot. I think that's a skill that everyone should have, regardless of what they're going to do professionally. As a lawyer, I do tend to write a lot as a lawyer too, but that stuff is just awful. Nobody wants to read that. That's boring.
Not even the judge wants to read it, right?
Especially the judges; they're the last that want to read it. But it did help me. It helped me more for the second book. It helped me more for the second book. The follow-up, Harley Law, actually follows a different character, and it goes on a very legal path. So I was kind of able to pull on that background a little bit.
It's interesting. Maybe for listeners, if we start off, if you can give a little bit of a synopsis of Hartley God,
Okay.
and then maybe later on we'll talk a little bit about Hartley Law. But for listeners, what is Hartley God? What is the basic premise there?
Hartley God, the premise of the story is, can you or can anybody believe in miracles if science is unable to prove that something happened? Okay, and that's the deeper question. And can you believe in miracles? And that's not, I always felt that that's not really necessarily a religious question. It's just more of a bigger spiritual question. Is there some greater power out there, whatever he or she might be? Could you believe in that if science can't prove something? Or have we all just really gotten too miserable and too cynical, So that's basically the premise. And the premise of the story, what happens, there's a church which happens to be located in the Strip District. The story is told through the confines of a Catholic church, so that's the vehicle that gets it there, right? So in this Catholic church, there is a priest who is rather liberal, and some of the more staunch traditional Catholics don't really like what he has to say. A splinter group kind of forms. People get a little bit radical, and there's a shooting. The priest is a target of an assassination inside the church, and for whatever reason, the assassination fails. And as it's described in the book, the bullets literally fall to the ground. I like to think the investigation is somewhat reasonable to what would happen. There's a forensic team, there's police officers, there's everything. And no matter what happens, nobody can explain why this assassination was unsuccessful. It's not like the person missed, it just never got there. So that's kind of the question is, can you believe that a miracle saved this guy's life, or we just haven't found the answer?
The thing that was really intriguing for me was how the character development, both of the individuals, but also how you were able to use the city as a character in many cases.
Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned the Strip District, and you mentioned Bloomfield a little bit. Talk about how that both happens from the writing standpoint, like how you as a writer are developing that. But also in the sense that how the city is a point of inspiration.
Yeah, both. All right, so first of all, my own unique style of writing, and I've been told this is unique because apparently I go in reverse, okay? But what's more important to me are characters. I like to really fully develop a character and have a character first, and then kind of fit the story around the character. A lot of people start with a storyline and put characters into it. I just always like characters. I like settings. I like scenes. I like characters because I think they're more memorable, That's just my style. So, talking about the city, absolutely, it's another character. So the first part I would say would be Bloomfield, right? And when I think of Bloomfield, the first thing I think of is the tradition, the third, fourth generation residents that are living there. It's Pittsburgh's Little Italy, Halloween parade, all of that's great stuff. But at the same time, it's also a great place if you're a musician, struggling to make it, an actor, something. It's just got this very gritty working class vibe, so I've always really liked that. Now, my character in Hartley God finds himself in Bloomfield. He relocates to Bloomfield from Philadelphia. So there was a series.
It's a good move. Let's just note that, right?
Right. Yeah, nobody can be blamed for that. Absolutely. So he went through a series of really life-changing events in a short amount of time, and none of them were good. So he comes back to Pittsburgh, relocates in Bloomfield, and he's basically there to recover. All right, well, if you got a character who's in Bloomfield who's looking to recover, what should his name be? Nico. Right? Nico's Recovery Room. I might have been there once or twice. I don't know. Okay. But yeah, that's kind of like a little inside. The book is full of inside references like that, there's only a handful of people that are going to kind of get. And that kind of makes me smile. I put in a line there that I know only 3 people are going to understand, but they're going to love it.
Right.
Something like Nico in Bloomfield recovering, I think that should translate a little bit more to the wider Pittsburgh audience. Probably not outside of Pittsburgh, but at least here, that's why I named the Nico, simple as that. I don't know if that's original or clever. I don't know, but I mean, that's where that character started. Right. Then the Strip District is also important. I honestly think the Strip District is one of the greatest neighborhoods in anywhere that I've ever been. In the small area that it is, it's just amazing. And if you think back about, I don't know the youngest memories that you have of the Strip, but I remember going to Permane Brothers when I was a young kid, right? And I swear that was the only thing there, or at least that was the only place that I would go. And to me, it seemed like a truck stop because there were all these trucks outside parked at the produce yards, and the truckers were in there eating. And that to me was Permane Brothers. And then as I got older and became of age, the Strip District turned into lots of nightclubs and bars, and now, 30 years later, there's, very expensive condominiums and office buildings. And it's a wonderful place to be still. It's changed, it's devolved, it's gotten better. But in many ways, it's also stayed the same. There's still St. Stan's. There's still Penn Mac. There's still the Harp and Fiddle. You can still go there on Saturday or Sunday morning, pre-pandemic, obviously. But I mean, you could still go there and just walk up and down the sidewalk and enjoy great coffee, Why
do you think that is? Like, just to pin in on that for a quick second, like, the arc of history of the Strip District is something that, as you mentioned, is very fascinating. But why does it still have that feel to it? Like, even amidst that evolution and change, as you've said, it still is just this great place that is, quintessential Pittsburgh, but also always a place where memories are being made.
I just think it started out that way. It started that way and it's continued, because if you go back to the early parts of the Strip District, it was a shanty town, right? And it was poor and it was impoverished and it was not a nice place, but it really was a place where immigrants that had absolutely nothing else ended up getting to. So it kind of is a starting point, or at least a place of hope. Like, this place might be not real good right now, but it's better than where we came from. So let's make the most out of it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's always just kind of moved in that progression. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I was a little kid going to Permane's, I'd never think that anybody would want to actually live in, like a high rise there. Right. But they do now. And I think that's awesome. Yeah. I'd like to see water taxis.
Water taxis. We could put that on the list of to-dos, right?
Right.
And you kind of touch on that in the story too. I mean, talk a little bit about that, because one of the main characters, his heart and his DNA is in the Strip.
Yeah. It was one of the main characters. There's actually two. This is a little bit of historical fiction. One of the main characters was, the fiction part of it was raised by a priest himself, and it was based on the real life. And this never happened. This is the fiction part of it, but the real life priest was named Father Cox, and obviously a legend in the Strip District, and what he did for the poor and the hungry, and so I incorporate a little of that in there. So one of the main characters basically grows up in the Strip District as a resident at a time when it was closer to the shanty town than it is today. Mm-hmm.
Does that, for you and as a writer, how much of that that story development did you have to do a lot of research, or is this kind of information that's just embedded through your lived experience?
I had to do some research, not a whole lot. I mean, that's kind of one of the benefits of being here is we kind of learn these things, right? And maybe we learn them in school, maybe we learn them from parents, maybe we learn them from whoever, Stush, right? But somebody's teaching us about what's happened there. And of course, the history center's down there too. So, I mean, you can't help but know what's going on. I found myself doing a lot more research for the second book.
Okay.
But for the first one.
Maybe lead into that a little bit. So that the second book is directly connected. This is, it's not a separate book, but it's a bridge off of the first story, right?
I would say so. Yeah. The publisher and others have commented that they believe that it stands on its own. Like each book could be separate.
Okay.
I personally think it would be better to read the first one because it is a continuation. You could read the second one without reading the first and know what's going on. I just don't think you'd appreciate what happened. Okay. Yeah. So basically the first book ends with another.
Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
I'm not going to ruin it. There's another shooting in the Strip District of all places. There's another shooting, right? And that's how the book ends. We don't really know what happened, okay? But the next book starts with a person being arrested.
We should say also before you go that second book is called Harley Law, correct?
Harley Law, yes. And I'll distinguish them real quick here. But the second book starts with a person being arrested, and that book follows this person through a trial, okay? So the first book, the publisher always liked to call it a spiritual mystery, right? That was the term that she used to describe this book. And okay, so if that one's a spiritual mystery, then the second one's a legal thriller.
Okay,
but it does have some elements of the first part. It does have some elements of this doesn't make sense. Now it's like, this doesn't make sense legally, whereas the first book was like, this doesn't make sense scientifically. Now the second one is like, this doesn't make sense legally. Like, what's going on here? So there's still some element of that. It's not just simply based on a trial. It's not, that type of book, but that's definitely the vehicle that gets it here as well.
Now for the, is it a similar type of, did you have to go through a similar type of process in terms of, because I haven't had a chance to read Harley Law yet, but did you have to go through a similar type of process? And also same thing, is the city a character in the second book?
City's a character. There's more about the city, the different spots. I go in reverse order. So in Hartley God, when I'm talking about the Strip, I just kind of touch on what it used to be, but really it's focused on what it is now, today, right? In Hartley Law, I go back to the Strip, but I go way back. There is a flashback that's significant, and it talks about the Strip District when it was a shanty town. There's some scenes in the Allegheny County Courthouse, which get descriptive. I learned from the first book because I had this fear when I was writing the first one, when I was working with an editor. I had this fear that I didn't want to be labeled like a homer. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like writing. So initially I would, put lines in there, like, and then, the two sat down at a pub and had a beer, and the editor was like, no, like, I want to know the name of that bar. Like, I want to know what they're eating. I don't want to know I want them to eat a Pittsburgh sandwich in a Pittsburgh bar and emphasize that. And that was my concern, was like, well, if I start doing that, I'm going to be like, I'm just writing like Pittsburgh stuff and only people from Pittsburgh. But I was told, no, that's incorrect. And if it gets to be too much, I'll let you know. But right now, that's what we need. Yeah, so I focused on that.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, and your mentality, I think, is something that resonates with us as Pittsburghers. Like we bring our hard hat and our lunch bucket, lunch pail to work, and then we go at it. It's a not a boastful place,
Correct.
and so we kind of demur in some cases. Does that is that one of the differences in the creative scene here versus, say, like a Detroit or dare I say, even Cleveland, that have had kind of some. We've had our successes, no doubt about it, right?
Right.
In the creative spaces. I don't want to underscore that, but the idea that there is a Pittsburgh brand, like a Detroit Rock City, or
Hmm.
in those cases. What's your thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely a Pittsburgh brand. I just think that it's yet to find the level of success that Seattle found with grunge music,
Right.
right? Or that New York City found with both punk and the origins of rap and hip hop,
Hmm.
right? All totally influenced by, I mean, when you think of punk music, is there anything more New York than the Ramones?
Right.
You,
Right.
you know what I mean? And that definitely, their music, their sound was influenced by the city. The same with grunge, and the same with early rap. So I think there's definitely a Pittsburgh vibe here, because especially if you're from Pittsburgh, because just like you said, we kind of grow up with that mentality. Like, I don't really care what you do as long as you do it well and as long as you work your butt off. Like,
Exactly.
that's it. Like, that's the thing. Like, whatever your job in life is, like, do that. So I think if you grew up here, you definitely have that influence. I just think that it's just, hopefully some of the talent that's here musically or creatively in other ways is more discovered and gets more of a national reputation, like a Seattle or
Right.
Detroit, or.
Are you looking at that too? I guess as a published author now, in terms of either latching on to the Pittsburgh diaspora and how we have Pittsburghers all around the country, or in terms of like sharing a great work like this with a larger audience. Like, what does that look like?
It's difficult. It's near impossible right now, if you want the truth, just because of the pandemic.
Right. Right.
Um, it, I really love the second book. I really, really think it's great, and I don't share that opinion, my own personal opinion about the first one. I think it was a good book. I think it's worth reading. I mean, you read it, but this is
Already,
my
yeah.
personal opinion. Okay. So my opinion of the second one is much better. And it's impossible right now to do anything really in terms of legitimate marketing, even locally, let alone nationally, because the indie writers in Pittsburgh one thing that Pittsburgh had before the pandemic, vibrant indie author scene.
Yeah.
Vibrant. The bookstores, the indie bookstores are so helpful and so knowledgeable, and such a great place to be. But you have to be there. You have to have book signings. You have to meet people. You have to sign their book and talk to them, and like we're doing now. And Pittsburgh's a great place for that. You really have to start somewhere and grow out. Well, what do you do when you can't even start at the beginning, right?
Right.
Because all the stores are closed, and there are people doing virtual book launches, but that's just not the same.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of like the thing, particularly with a local book, right? Or is you need to build the network, and it's just same way how we found kind of your work is like word of mouth, right?
Organic growth, yes.
Organic growth, yeah, and how that gets shared.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is one of the challenges that we're in terms of that, but also the correlate, and this is just personally, and it kind of leads into kind of one of the just looking managing our time here. One of the things I've noticed during the pandemic personally is just being able to consume more written material,
Right.
more written long form material, I should say. Um, So whether it's books or kind of long magazine articles, certainly everybody's scrolling through their phone and
Hmm.
things of that nature, probably too much. But the ability to actually sit and kind of read a book, I think has been one of the things that, for better or worse, has been kind of a hallmark, I think, of the
I
pandemic.
agree. Netflix is awesome, but it gets boring after a while. There's only so long you can sit there. So yes.
That's right. So one of the things that we always ask our guests here on the
Mhm.
Grant Street Experience, is a little section we call reading, listening, and watching. And that's actually kind of what prompted this whole section in terms of inviting local authors. So for you, Will Three, what are some of the things that you are reading, listening, and watching right now?
I'm reading two things right now. I'm reading a book called Playing Through the Whistle, which I highly, highly recommend. It's a story about the J&L mill in the town of Aliquippa, and how
Wow.
basically the town of Aliquippa grew up around the mill and how it started its, upward progress, and how due to culture and environment, how it declined. There's a lot of great lessons. And of course, they look at that also through the eyes of the great football players that have come from that area. Um, uh, I'm going to be using parts of that in my sociology class, because I think it's a good demonstration of a lot of sociological aspects, but it's also local, which makes it
Yeah.
better. Um, but I'm also reading the Beastie Boys book right now as well. Which I thought, to be honest with you, I just kind of thought it's just gonna be like, just goofy. But it's actually a really good. It's not as heavy as Playing Through the Whistle, but it's well written, and there's some good stuff in there too. So that's what I'm reading.
Well, just to hold on for that for a quick second. So the J and L story of Playing Through the Whistle, is that similar in types of your genre of like an integrative, creative fiction type of work, or is it more into like the details, kind of a fictional, or excuse me, nonfiction work?
I would say it's more nonfiction.
Okay.
It's more nonfiction, and it's about 3 times as thick as mine. Okay, so it's not going to be as quick a read, but it's well worth it. I've recommended it to several people, especially if you have any ties to the Aliquippa area, or if you had a family member that worked at J&L at one point. It's a pretty good book.
The author might have to be a future guest on the Grant Street Experience.
There you go. There you go. He's a national guy, so
We'll give him a pass.
he has to be on a, yeah. He doesn't fall into the local artist category. I don't think.
And then the Beastie Boys story. This recently came out, right?
Yeah, it recently came out. This the surviving members, At Rock and Mike D, wrote it. MCA has passed away, and I think that was kind of like the origin of why they wrote this book. It's just like kind of reflecting on all these stories, at least from their 2 points of view. And it's good.
A quick read, or
No, it's also very long too, but it's good because it's there. A chapter might be, a particular story would be one chapter, and it might be 5 pages, right? So you could pick it up and read a few of the stories and put it down, and every time you start it, you're kind of starting from the beginning.
I had heard something, and I forget where I picked this up. I want to say it was one of Malcolm Gladwell's podcasts with Rick Rubin.
Uh-huh.
That, and this blew me away, that Beastie Boys and Madonna were on the same tour. Like
Yeah. Yes.
like Madonna's first tour was like the Beastie Boys were like the opening act or something like
Yes.
that nature.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. Who would have guessed?
Who would have thought that? But I guess Rick Rubin was like the intersection,
Yes.
between the two, because he was booking both of them in different clubs in New York City at that time, and then helped kind of lead the bill putting it together. So.
And he produced their first album, so it was different because he was also producing like other rap acts. But if you remember back to that first album, it was all like Led Zeppelin samples and hard rock riffs and stuff like that, and nobody was doing that. So he kind of bridged into a new type of genre.
Exactly.
He was the bridge between the two.
And anything that you're listening or watching to that you recommend?
Antoine Stanley, I just got turned on to.
Okay.
I don't think he's new. He's newer, but I've just got turned on to him. Soul singer. He's really talented. I really, really enjoy him a lot. But what I found, and this is interesting here. I've noticed that I've been listening to more consistently early 90s hip hop.
Yeah.
And I just find myself listening to it more and more. And I don't think it's out of any kind of nostalgia, but really what I think it is, all of this stress, all of this anxiety from COVID, right? From the election, from the civil unrest and all this stuff, and then you go into school and you teach these kids, and these kids are all nervous, and even if you're not prone to anxiety, that starts coming back on you. So I'm listening to early 90s hip hop. I think that I've just kind of decided that that's my comfort tunes.
Comfort tunes.
Some people have comfort food that they go to. I'm going to comfort tunes. So I'm listening to a lot of that, and the Pogues, which again I guess I would put them into comfort
music as well.
But there's Johnny Depp is making a movie, or has made a movie that's soon to be released on Shane McGowan and the Pogues, and it's done by Johnny Depp. So I keep reading little snippets here and there about it, and that's just kind of sparked me to go back and revisit my Pogues collection.
That's a pretty good move. The 90s hip hop is just like Tribe Called Quest, or like
exactly.
Yeah.
That was the first one I was going to say. Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Eric B. and Rakim. Maybe a little of the early Jay-Z stuff.
It is a good point. I mean, it is kind of timely and kind of when you're soul searching, it's exactly the type of music that speaks to the times, right?
And at that time in my life when that was out, I would think I was in a really, really good place, right? You're still close to your parents, but you're ready to be an adult, but you're still, you got people around you, and it was an enjoyable time, enjoyable music, a lot of good memories from that time. So.
And kind of a creative explosion in itself, right? I think that.
Oh, absolutely.
That is one of the things that you have to be removed from it, I think, to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
But like when you do kind of look back in the rearview mirror a bit, and you're like, yeah, that stuff was pretty deep. It was good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Will 3, I want to thank you so much. It's great to kind of both share your story and then share the stories that you are writing about Pittsburgh with our listeners. This is absolutely kind of a terrific deep dive. Thank you for being the inaugural author.
I still can't believe that. Thank you so much.
Make sure you tell all your friends and family about it. So
you better believe I will.
So we appreciate you, and we appreciate you helping to tell the stories of Pittsburgh. So thank you so much.
And thank you for having me.
So thank you guys for listening in to the Grant Street Experience. We want to thank Will 3. We also want to thank the fabulous Pittsburgh cable team for their production skills and helping to pull this show together. And thank you for listening in. We'll catch you next time on the Grant Street Experience. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.